Okay, welcome back. This is video number 3 in our reflections on the first phase of Humanity Project. And in this conversation, we're just going to look at what we're doing next. So we started to form all the plans ahead, and with all the learnings that we've covered in the last 2 videos. So first, Ruth, do you want to just explain what we kind of think we're doing next?
Yeah, sure. So our second phase is going to run between September 2024, just gone, and September 2025. We're going to look to start engaging 10 locations across the UK, and we are starting to work with trusted partners who we already know. So Claire, Lee and Nick have existing relationships with really robust community organisers and individuals who really get this work, and those are our initial locations, and they are Marsh Farm in Luton, Port Talbot, Longsight and Moss Side in just surrounding Manchester, and Woodley in Stockport.
So those places are, like you say, places where we've got some good connections with people who are variously quite well rooted in the place where they live. What's different about the previous approach and this one, I think, is that we've taken this focus of saying, well, what happens if you go and work with somebody in a place where they already have lots of connection, and potentially where they also have a space where they can easily organise from, because it's such a game changer, I think, to not have to do that schlepping around, finding a venue, negotiating the price for the venue. It can be expensive. You've got to get in and get out, and you know, the flexibility of working with people who are already situated in a community centre, or they have access to a hall or something, some kind of space where they can gather people, is like amazingly, like in a practical sense, quite a big deal for organising this stuff. But also the fact that those people are already rooted in a place and have lots of connections means that they've started with some kind of depth in that location, and then we want to go kind of much slower than we did before to see how that works, and hopefully that will be a deeper, slower approach, so that those people can not only bring together the people that they know in the place, but also build the support around themselves to go out and mobilise more people to come in who perhaps don't normally come to that space or use that service or meet the people who go to that centre or hall or venue or whatever. And in that way, for me, it feels it's a much more community organising model than a sort of momentum-y mobilising model that we've used in the past. So it's slower and longer. It's built on lots of trust. You need lots of work on relationships. And I remember in the early days of this project saying, if we're successful, the currency of the Humanity Project is going to be relationship. And you can't just magic that into being. So doing that work in a way which kind of, I suppose, centres the relational work, which includes doing, a longer and a more focused version of a listening campaign in a place, means that you foreground the gathering together with lots and lots of in-depth conversations. We know that people in local places will then variously have different needs and will want to do different kinds of partnerships. And for example, we've been working to build up a relationship with Operation Black Vote, which as a kind of black institution, let's say, in the UK, is going to be a great partner, I hope, to be able to support working with majority Black and Asian communities to find out what happens when we try to focus assemblies in places where there are particular experiences from perspective of race and discrimination or marginalisation, but also like what happens when you work in those spaces and try to build the bridges maybe between like some divides that there might be in a community. So that's like a whole universe of stuff to learn and try out and stuff, and hopefully they're going to be a great partner to do that with. But I think we're also going to be like looking at other organizations to think about how partnership really works and what does it mean. Go on, Ruth.
And just on that, I think I'd love to share with everyone this community animator role that we have identified, because something we were struggling with in the pilot phase was that we were trying to almost control the way things were going in a local area, but actually a lot of us didn't have any real relationship in that local area. Whereas this approach is we identify an organisation and then a community animator, so someone who is already really trusted in their local community, knows what's going on, knows the mums group, knows the various religious groups, knows what's needed in that community, and can really start building with deep roots that already exist. So we will be working and partnering with a community animator, and within Humanity Project we have someone, which may grow to be a few people who then support that community animator to do the work. So that's and actually bringing back something we were discussing in, I think, the first video, which is how do you create leadership in this sort of organisation and movement? Well, I believe it's signposting. And that, if you think about that community animator in their local area, and then that community animator supporter who is the bridge to Humanity Project. In Humanity Project, we have so much resource, but also a network of even wider resources within the ecosystem. So that bridge is essentially a signpost saying, right, what does that area need? What does that community animator, what are they telling us that they need? I now signpost them to all the support that's available, which I think is going to be crucial in not being too hierarchical and kind of, we know what we're doing, we're the leaders. It's just about going, well, you need facilitation training. Well, how about this? Listening training. Or how about this? It's signposting, which I think is going to be really effective.
Yeah. And I think, there's a lot of resources in Community Organisers, which is the charity that Nick set up, who are also like an official kind of partner with us on this. And they've got tons of resources on listening campaigns and training community organisers and all the rest of it. So there's a wealth of experience and also like materials and training programs and stuff that we can sort of look through and learn from, and also some of it we can just lift up and give away to people, and it'll be really useful. So that's really great. And then the last point I'll make is just about culture. So from the beginning we always said like we need this to be quite a culture-led kind of project. In fact, almost what I've come around to thinking is that we're trying to change a culture, not a political system. And if you take the technical pressure off yourself of saying like we need to design the right new governance infrastructure and it's technical and you need a politics professor to help you understand it, and there's like loads of papers about it and blah blah blah, and actually whilst it's important to have good process and understand why things work, and we've found the micro design elements of like how we hold spaces and how we design our things really matters, it's quite like a sort of relief when you think, but what is it like in a cultural sense, and how is it to make a culture of connection and sort of self-belief and belief in each other that makes us feel like we're sort of fertilizing the soil in a way where we could actually participate in a democracy properly as a country together, everybody involved, everybody feeling not just like empowered to be able to do it, but like feeling confident enough in their sense of themselves and their relationships with each other that they can actually negotiate a way forwards because they're getting themselves informed. They're trying to understand why other people think the things that they do. They're not just kind of getting battered by the culture war. And, that sort of famous phrase about opinions, they're like arseholes, everyone's got one. But like, what's really going on for people? Like, why do we all have these like opinions that we've got? And for me, that's a cultural thing. And I think what's exciting for me is that I've been sort of doing this parallel work on bringing together people from the arts and culture sector, thinking about how we can generate events and experiences that like support people to think about the things that we care about in this space. So things like empathy or making speeches, learning rhetoric. How do you communicate? How do you go from being a person who says politics isn't for me and I don't really have a voice? How do you lift people into where they're stood on a soapbox with a megaphone making their first speech? You know, there's some stuff here that's actually totally joyful and fun that we're sort of tapping into. And I'm really hopeful that the things that I'm finding in that space are going to become more and more and more sort of like merged in together with the work that we're doing here. And in particular, the project that I'm working on at the moment we're going to test it out, I think, in Luton first, is to sort of encourage this kind of solidarity focused banner making project, which we intend to run as like successive art workshops, where you're bringing people together before you even do the kind of main gig to make some art together, make a display that takes the sort of sense of what we're putting into the project from our sort of hearts to then put that on the outside of people's buildings in an estate or in a community, in a neighbourhood, so that we can start to build bridges between people and think about what's important to people and what they want to sort of put out on the street. And you know, the art workshops that we did at the beginning of Extinction Rebellion were something that came from a previous load of artwork that I'd been doing. So for me, it feels really exciting that, although it's taken quite a while to work out what it could be, that there's a making and a sort of art workshop participatory arts thread which is coming together that we're going to try out. And if that's successful, then it could really help to become part of this model of how we want to work. So watch this space, basically. Over to you. Oh, go on, Ruth.
I can just add a few more things about this idea that you can create these events that are just really addictive. People go, oh, I can't believe I'm going to miss the Popular Assembly this quarter, or because there are things, you know, there's food there and there's music and there's a bouncy castle for kids. And I think it's this idea of creating a fun environment that people don't want to miss. And that's, I think a change from our pilot phase, in that we were thinking more about, we were definitely focusing on what happens when people were in the room, but now we're really thinking about what do you need to do to get them in the room first, and to get people who may go, well, I don't want anything to do with politics, but they still want to go to that. And then when they're in there, you go, hey, but look, you can come in and you can feel welcome and you can get involved. But it's how you draw them in the first place. And it sounds like it's food. I'm just hearing it a lot. But food, music, bouncy castles.
lots of bouncy castles. I'm going to share just a few points, just to add to what's been said, and then we'll probably close off after that, I imagine. So these are just a couple of other things that we're also thinking about in this new phase of the project. So the first one is making sure that every assembly sort of program that happens in each location is really rooted in a kind of a strategy for change. And this is how you can ensure that action really follows on from the assemblies. It's how you can make sure that things, the events that are being run really have kind of cut through as well. So it's fitting each assembly into this kind of, it can be a narrative or a journey for change, or it can be more of a strategy, whatever word you want to use, having really the whole journey in mind before you start, rather than just organizing the first assembly and going, oh, what next, I think is really important. Those journeys, those strategies will look different in every single place, and they'll be designed and thought through by the organizers who are leading in those areas. The next thing is also thinking about what other tools are there in the democratic arsenal. So this is a phrase that I like to use, the democratic arsenal, and what it speaks to is like all the different tools that are out there for I guess making decisions and guiding people through the decision making process. And not only are there as many assembly ways of doing an assembly as there are to skin a cat, there are also loads of different tools as well as assemblies. So I think the question is assemblies and what else is there, and how could assemblies be used alongside approaches that maybe other people are using, or perhaps considering other approaches that could fit nicely alongside assemblies as well. And the final point I want to make is about how we learn from what we're doing, how we measure it, which I think is a really, really important point, not just for the sake of it, but to reinforce what we're doing and make sure we're learning at every single stage. So as well as the kind of the ways that we were measuring learnings from the first phase of the project, we're going to really focus on sustainability, which is something I mentioned before. How to make sure that something continues and it's not a flash in the pan, but this is something that goes on for 10, 20 plus years and becomes a staple feature in the community. And then another thing is impact. How do we measure impact? And there's loads of different ways you can do that. But those are really, really key sort of measures that we're going to be paying much more close attention to this phase of the project. Back to you, Claire.
Thanks, Lachlan. Yeah, so we're going to have a sort of launch webinar to talk about the plans in more detail and live online. And that's going to be on Thursday, the 12th of December, between 11 and 12 p.m. on UK time. So we'll put a link to that somewhere here underneath, and please do share it around. Join the mailing list as well, so that you can get more updates. As we move forwards, we're developing a kind of thoughts about how we're going to communicate as an organisation, not just in a sort of strategic sense, which we've done some great new, I hate the term branding, but some great new aesthetic kind of graphic work, which I think is going to be really helpful for the next phase of the project. It will have a new sort of look and feel and a new load of assets to give away to people, but also we've been working on the sound of our voice and what we want to say and the way we want to talk about the work that we're doing now that we've got all this learning under our belts. In addition to that, we're also in the process of trying to work out how we communicate what's happening in the project. And for me, it's always felt challenging to think about how you either do or don't use social media. Obviously, in the recent months, there's been sort of, I don't know what the term is to be polite about it, but there's been a sort of an escalation in how worrying, I suppose, some of the digital platforms are for people, and a mass exodus going on at the moment as we record this from Twitter. So those platforms feel very volatile, and they also feel like they're part of the problem, quite frankly, in terms of like the way that people communicate. So we're keen to develop an approach to storytelling and lifting up faces and voices and real people out of the networks in a really constructive and positive and useful way for people. So I can't tell you everything about how we're going to communicate in the future, but we do intend to use our mailing list a little bit more now in the next phase as well. So do sign up for that. And all is left to say is thank you to Ruth and Lachlan for being so dedicated and patient with this project, because it's not been totally easy all the time. And thanks to everyone else who's been involved, because I know there's just like acres and acres and acres of hard work that have happened all over the country, and very grateful for us to be able to learn everything that we've learned through the hard work and the effort of lots of good people. So yeah, we'll be back soon, I guess, with more update videos. Thanks for watching.